England, Brummel. The budget is just around the corner. Today we have a chat with Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Ghana, Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo. Dr. Jagdeo, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good to finally chat with you after a while. Our last conversation, we ranged on a number of issues, but
sure. But you know, I've been working a lot to get a lot of the things moving. So we had to get the NRF in place. We had to get the local content bill passed in the National Assembly. A lot of the other things that we promised in the manifesto, we had to get them either done or prepare for them to be done. And so it's been a hectic year. 2021 was really, really hectic. But I can say that we've achieved a lot in terms of the planning process, which may not be visible to many people as yet, but it would have a huge impact in the future years on our economy and on the welfare of people. And this has to do largely with the planning of the projects that will give effect to our economic and social strategy of the future. So the highways, the port facilities, the power plants, the ICT facilities, working on an ICT master plan for the country, then preparing to now lay out the infrastructure on healthcare, which I don't want to get into details, but hopefully before the end of this year, we have programs in place to build several new hospitals, contracts awarded, and to rehabilitate the existing ones. So a lot of that work, which requires, many meetings and not much publicity, and that's why I couldn't meet a lot with anyone, do much public engagements, but we've been getting those things done.
In the COVID environment that we were existing in, are you satisfied then with the work the government has put in at this stage?
Yes, well, the way I assess things is that the COVID is given. The pandemic has been there. We came into office, the pandemic was there. We had shut down the country up to that point in time, August 2nd, 2020. And so I assess our government's performance on the basis of a few metrics. The first issue had to do with how did we manage the COVID situation compared with other countries, because it's hard to compare with ourselves. And so we took an early decision that we could not continue the lockdown that the country had been forced into up to August, that we had to balance addressing the COVID with opening up the economy. And I think from both perspectives, so let's look at balance. How do we address the COVID? We had to quickly build up a capability for testing and for dealing with cases in the ICU, which we did. We didn't have beds, there was no oxygen, all of that, no testing kits, no capability of testing. Today we have a national capability to do thousands of tests per day. And I'm telling you PCR, not the antigen test. We now have several beds now that can handle ICU patients. We can handle maybe 30, 45 persons in ICU. We now have expanded our capability of handling more people. We have an inbuilt supply of oxygen. You know, we had to walk around with these little tanks. There was no oxygen supply at the Lilendale Hospital, etc. We have more doctors trained and are aware of the situation, and nurses that could address the COVID pandemic. And so, in spite of the many waves that the world has seen, which has shut down countries repeatedly and led to a large number of deaths, we've managed to navigate those with people. Some of our people have died tragically. We wish no one had to die. But when you look on a per capita basis, because you can't look at absolute numbers, we are way ahead in terms of the developed world, particularly, say, the UK or the United States, which is better resourced and had all the vaccines at the beginning. We managed to get about 70% of our people with at least one dose of the vaccine. We're one of the countries that have had successful vaccination campaign. And I believe our numbers compared to Trinidad and Tobago are low, very low, because we have, right at the beginning, we said WHO or no WHO approved vaccine. If it's safe and people are using it, we're buying it and giving it to our people. And our people luckily went forward, they took the vaccines, and many of them are safer today because of that. So I think we have fared as well as we could in such circumstances. We didn't, and then on opening up the economy, too many people were hurting. They were losing jobs. And so look at those countries that have gone into major economic slumps because of COVID. We did not. We managed to get more people working. So on all, if you ask me, are more people working today than when we came into office? The answer is yes. Have we generated more jobs now today, or are we generating more jobs, and have we generated more jobs from August 2nd? The answer is a bold yes, significantly more. Do we have greater disposable income today than in that period? The answer is yes. Are people paying less taxes now than they were paying on August 2nd, 2020? The answer is yes. $40 billion less per year in taxes. So so when you look at those, are some of the metrics we're using. The availability of drugs in the hospital, more services being delivered to people. Now we have had some setbacks too. Because of the prolonged period in the pandemic, we have had a global shortage of food and supplies. So that has impacted on cost of living. That's a setback. So we've had a large number of successful areas, but we've had setbacks too. We try to address the cost of living issue by removing taxes, by using the old freight rate. You know, freight had moved from $3,500 to nearly $20,000 for a container coming from China, US dollars. So if we had used the $20,000 to calculate the tax now, because it's cost, insurance, and freight, then the tax will go up. We then decided to use the old rate. So we're not using the current freight rate, we're using the $3,500 to calculate the taxes. We did a number of those things. We removed all the taxes from food items that we had, or majority of food items. But still, if the prices are higher and there are shortages globally, you can't avoid the pass-through, but it bothers us. So this is what been engaging us. So in the new budget, as you would see, because we're here to talk a bit about the budget, so you will see the framework that we establish in our manifesto, and we have spoken about that framework of ensuring infrastructure for future growth, that will be one of the dominant areas in the budget. So new highways, roads, investing on power grid, on ICT, the same things that make our business more competitive so we can generate more jobs and more diverse jobs in agriculture, in ICT, in other areas, not just oil and gas. That's one area that will be a dominant area in the budget. Many people believe you can spend every cent now and consume it. If you do that, you can't plan for future years, increase prosperity in the future years. So we're balancing the spending on ourselves now versus future welfare and future jobs and future benefits, because you have to invest in for that to happen. Secondly, continuation of ensuring that the environment to do business and to create jobs is improved. So tax reductions in the budget, making the business process easier for people, and of course, implementing the local content law, which will bring big benefits to Guyanese. You see some countries now are trying to muscle in on our opportunities. We're not going to allow that to happen. So that's another big area in the budget. And then the welfare enhancing areas, education, healthcare, big investments in those areas. So on cost of living, we'll have to work with communities during the course of the year to see how we can mitigate some of it, cost of living. So these are some, without going into great detail, because next week you will hear the budget, these are some of the factors influencing the crafting of the budget. And people are going to see it explained in next Wednesday. The budget will be tabled.
While we talk about the budget being tabled next Wednesday, so budget day is next Wednesday, consultations would have been had. Government came with its plans. Mm-hmm. Consultations were wide. From those consultations, were those from the various stakeholders meshing with government? And when you talk about meshing with what government came together, how would you arrive at the priority areas in which, yes, the spending is going to happen and the investment?
So, first of all, a lot of, in every sector will come with a wish list, often to the consultations. We are ensuring that the system moves forward, because you can try to fix things in a stopgap way, try to appease people and say, oh, we'll remove your taxes here. But first of all, the measures need to be aligned to your vision and goals. And I took time to outline some of the goals that we've had. Job creation, wealth creation for people, high education, making sure people have higher or greater access to quality education, healthcare, improving our health approaches to healthcare, greater security in their home. These are some of the strategic goals. Then the investments and the programs and the plans have to support the strategic goal. Recognizing you can't do everything that people want all at once, nor would it be advisable to do some of the things. So you have to constantly keep the strategic goals in mind. You can be very convenient, but convenience doesn't secure long-term growth in an economy and long-term welfare and sustainable jobs for our people. And so those are some of the key issues. And then on the other hand, you have to look at sustainability. So not just environmental, but financial sustainability. Because some people would have you introduce measures that with all the revenue we collect and all the oil and gas money, we still can't fulfill those measures. So sustainability is a crucial element, financial sustainability in the planning process.
Dr. Jagdeo, Ghana is projected to grow exponentially. In preparing this budget, would it be considered an aggressive, ambitious, or a cautious approach that government is taking to putting out its third budget within the last 2 years?
Well, that in itself has been a big issue. We've had 3 budgets now in a 18 months period. So preparing a budget and getting it done has taken up a lot of time. I don't like to characterize whether it's moderate or aggressive. Budgets have to support a vision for the country. And so if our vision is to grow the oil and gas industry in a particular manner that creates more value for our people, then the measures have to be in place to support that. So in the budget, you're going to see more money for training Guyanese to ensure that they get more of the jobs that we give effect to the local content policy. If you were to give an example, if we want greater agriculture now, which is what we want, we said we want food security and greater agricultural exports. Last year's budget, we had money to build a road into the intermediate savanna and to build a silo working with the grain producers. This year, you will see the possibility of government doing more to co-invest with the private sector for these facilities, particularly in areas where we cannot generate the same type of employment opportunities as we are doing in Region 3 and 4. Because 3 and 4, because of the development around Georgetown and in the Demerara River and on the East Bank, more jobs are here. But we have to look to the outlying regions, Region 6, Region 10, Region 2, 5, all of these, and the hinterland regions, to ensure that we generate more jobs there. So you will see facilities in the budget to ensure that happens. We want to improve healthcare. Our definition of primary healthcare has expanded now. So it means greater availability of drugs, but the services that people can get in a hospital would now have to expand. So in the past, if you had to do CT scan here alone, we now have to start in Georgetown. We have to now build the facilities, which will start now, that you can have CT scans in 6 or 7 regional hospitals. So that sort of thing. So I'm not going to characterize them as aggressive or moderate. I just think that the vision is there, the goals are there, the sectors that you want to support you're clear on, and that is the difference between us and APNU. We have that clear vision, we have the goals in mind, and then now the budget is just the means, the financial means to achieve those goals. And that's how we see it.
In putting your budget together and Ghana being looked at as the Dubai of the Caribbean at this stage, we're looking at a lot of investment also coming in. Local content policy was put into place. But daily we're coming in, people are coming into the country, and yes, you spoke about investing in training for our locals. The budget takes into consideration and the policy and the manifesto into policy of the government. How do we look to balance ourselves and establish ourselves as, yes, the leaders, we're talking it, this is what they're saying. In the trading putting forward? How do we look to establish Ghana? It's not only just saying it, but yes, let's lead from the front.
No, but I don't think any country has led more from the front as we have recently on ensuring that their people benefit from oil and gas resources. I've examined the experience of Trinidad and Tobago, many of the other countries, on ensuring this. We've passed local content legislation. The first year we got it. This was a clamor from 2016, for everyone. We have a law now which says to oil and gas companies and their subcontractors that you have to, in 40 areas in the economy where we believe we have immediate capacity, you have to now hire only Guyanese or Guyanese companies in those areas, or up to a certain percentage, right? So in some areas it's 100%, some areas it's 90%. So that presupposes we already have the capacity. We don't have to build the capacity there. We believe we can supply those goods and services now. And that could be between 400 to 600 million US a year in the area that we've carved out for our people already. So this is even before we start any training. Now we're establishing a training institute as part of this budget, and we've set aside money to train welders, everyone else. So that's just incremental. Now to give our people more skills so they can even go into other areas, not just the 40 areas, but we can start expanding that list into more complex operations like fabrication, etc. We're way ahead of the game. We now demand, the law now will force the companies to submit two plans, a 5-year local content development plan and an annual development plan, local content plan. They would have to have 3 subcomponents. Employment subcomponent, it shows us how they're employing people. Secondly, a training, a capacity building component. Each of these companies would have to show they're building local capacity. And thirdly, procurement. So it's very, very strong. We sat and worked through this. And this was a pledge we made. I remember in opposition, we talked about this, we were pushing the government to do this. They didn't do any of this, protecting our people. And making sure that these companies now have to only recruit Guyanese companies. So that's a huge thing for our people now. A lot of the other companies, the investors who are coming in, who are talking about this now, they now have to go and form joint ventures with our people, because the law says the company, to be on that register, you have to have 51% Guyanese ownership, and 75% management, and 90% of your staff have to be Guyanese. So this has suddenly made Guyanese companies very attractive, and Guyanese nationals who will be registered there. That doesn't have to await budget. It doesn't have to await any training, but there is more money to give to support our people more and to expand the opportunities. So that's what I mean by transferring some of this wealth to our people. We can't build the FPSO. So apart from the royalty that we get and apart from the share of profit oil, we have to get some of the business opportunities. That is how you seek to rebalance the agreements, the lopsided agreement, by forcing some of the business opportunities to come to our people.
Understood. The budget takes into consideration spending, but then the government is looking at reducing borrowing as well, now that we have this added revenue coming in from oil and gas. What mechanism does the government have in place, will be implementing to manage its spending as well as borrowing and also reducing borrowing?
So when I speak about, so the fiscal deficit this year in this budget will be lower than the fiscal deficit in in last year,
2021.
right? Because from a financing perspective, that means we'd have to borrow less because some of the oil and gas revenue will go to replace the high level of borrowing that we've had. So whilst the deficit in itself, because we're spending more now, so the deficit may widen because the capital projects, the big capital projects are coming on stream now. But the financing of the deficit will be, the financing needs will be reduced now. So we don't have to borrow as much to finance the deficit because we're using some of the oil and gas resources. What that does is because a significant part of the borrowing, starting with APNU, $90 billion a year, was coming from the domestic market, it now leaves more funds in the domestic market available for private sector lending. So there's no upward pressure on the interest rates there. In fact, the banks have to be a bit more aggressive to seek out people to lend to because they don't have this easy way of lending to the government. So part of that is, when I spoke about this element of sustainability, I don't want to get complex with it, but that is part of the sustainability.
And that, of course, would have come into place with what the banking sector and the financial
No. That's simply because we have decided not to use part of the oil and gas proceeds to finance the deficit.
Comes back down to more money in the pockets of persons this year. This budget would have been, the taxes would have been, since 2020 when you did the first budget and you removed all of those taxes, you're looking at more spending power for the people. In essence,
yes, that's disposable income. That is why we did a lot of that right at the beginning. And now today people, they're paying about 40 billion less in taxes on those items that we replaced back than they would have to pay today. So that returns to people's pockets.
For the regular man in the street looking on for what to expect next Wednesday.
I can't give you the details, but I'm just telling you about the framework, largely because I saw the PNC putting out a statement now about several issues, but just to let you know what's driving all of this, the framework, what's in the head of the policymakers as they work on creating the budget, what's motivating us.
Dr. Jagdeo, thank you very much for giving us an insight into what is going to be happening. Yeah. The government's budget is going to be coming out in 2020. It's third in just about 18 months. Yeah. It's going to be tough. I know it's been tough. You've placed a lot of faith as well in Senior Finance Minister Dr. Ashton Singh. How has he performed throughout this?
No. He's great. We work well together. He's been around a long time, so we have an understanding. And he believes in strong fiscal discipline, the same thing that has guided every PPP government. I noticed the APNU has mentioned some points. Is it APNU or PNC?
There was a PNC press conference where they're calling for a number of measures. One of those would have been to not tax minimum wage and increase the income tax threshold, as well as to look at an incremental 10% increase for public servants, of course, in consultation with the unions.
Okay. Yes. So it had to do a lot with taxation and stuff. I find it very strange that, so one of the big areas is taxation. That a party that just demitted office 18 months ago, that has sought to put taxes on every single area, increased taxes by about $40 billion more on basic food items, on medical supplies, on everything, would now have any proposal for a budget that seeks to reduce taxes. But we looked at the entire framework. We not just as that's why I'm saying it is a framework that you look at. And so we are looking at tax reduction generally. So you may see adjustments on issues like threshold and all of that, but in the budget. But we have looked at the disposable income, and that's why we've made it clear that today Norton should just, or the PNC should just look at all the items that they had put the taxes on and that we had to remove. And they should annualize it and see what the benefits have been to Guyana and the people of the country. If we hadn't done that, just imagine with the cost of living increase to the prices going up, how much higher it would have been today with the retention of those taxes. We had to remove them. That's one. So on the taxation side, I find it very, very funny that they would even have a single proposal to suggest now. But I guess when you were there, we could have made a lot of suggestions because we were opposed. You recall we were opposed to all these taxes going on because they were not there before. We were opposed to changing the taxes for the miners when they changed the taxes for the miners. We fought that. We managed to get it reversed a bit. But they have no leg to stand on to talk about any tax reduction, having just come out of government and increased all these taxes.
You would have addressed a number of those issues in terms of taxes on the food security. Same issues they're pretty much bringing back up in their budget presentation and then trying to deal with the debt ceiling and all of that, but you would have addressed all.
Yes, food security, I saw that, food security about planting more, growing more food and stuff. And can you imagine again, we just practically shut down some of the sugar estates. They increased the water charges by 500%, the DNI charges, land charges by 300% in some areas. How are people going to go into agriculture and food security if you're going to increase that? If you put the 14% VAT on the tractors and combine, you increase the price for DNI charges, you increase price for land, the lease rentals for the agricultural sector. You put a VAT on the input, like the pesticides and fertilizers. How are you going to have food security? And that is what they did. We remove all of those. We now have a plan for agricultural development. I don't want to spend time laying it out here because it's multifaceted across the country. But we believe agriculture, ICT, tourism, all of these areas, services are just as crucial as the oil and gas industry, and they would receive a lot of support this year. So again, on that sounds so hollow. The person who will peddle that or take that statement and replicate it has to be a person who never looked at APNU's policy carefully or probably is new to Guyana. And that's the only person. I saw they want us to, they said we can steal the oil and gas money, right? So they want a digital currency introduced. This is the most ridiculous, ludicrous thing I've heard. With a digital currency, you can steal more money faster without any trace. I don't understand who put that in. They wanted to sound a bit modern. You know, with Bitcoin, you have a computer, or so the central bank has a computer, say a computer locked in the vault. And we have the Bitcoin codes in there, say $100 million. And then the computer crashes or We can't recover it, the hard drive, and we lose our $100 million. Or someone steals the computer. That's digital currency for you. It only exists in codes and on the instrument that you have. I don't think Norton knows much about this. But I don't know if he actually read that statement that came out here, because he didn't read the statement where his party called for the price controls to be introduced. And he said he doesn't support price controls. And the statement that he was referring to has price controls in it.
Disconnected there.
Yeah, very big disconnect there. So I don't understand who. I think they just do it for the sake of sounding sophisticated. But it's the most ludicrous thing, and that is to prevent people stealing and to enhance transparency. Now, if they were talking about something else, using the technology that drives Bitcoin, introducing that, which is blockchain technology. Now that is important for government to use blockchain technology for transaction, which is what we are looking at, but not a digital currency. The digital currency has inherent risks and huge risks at this point in time. That is why so many countries have not embraced it. And can't imagine which central bank. El Salvador has decided to use that, but they're on the fringes. None of the major countries have decided that their central banks will introduce digital currencies, but they want us to do it here.
That will take some bit of studying and everything.
And everything else. It's unbelievable that you could have a suggestion like that coming from a party that calls itself the main opposition party.
A lot of that coming. You expecting any support or much support from them during this budget period?
Oh no! Even when you try to reach out, like you recall when we were looking at revising the NDCs, right? So we had the first meeting to start off the consultation. We haven't even submitted it up to now. They came and said, "Oh, you're not consulting." This time, that was the first meeting to organize the consultations, which is still going on. That was 6 months ago. And they came, read a statement, and then left. And now everything is Article 13 of the Constitution, right? They didn't remember the other articles that said you should hold an election if you lose a no confidence vote. So it's Article 13, pure nonsense about consultation. So that was the first instance. Every time you try to engage, you can't have a productive, a technical discussion. It's always about the politics and racism, and that's counterproductive. We just have to keep working for our people. And when I say our people, I don't mean those who voted for the PPP alone. I mean all the people who can. And so this group here cannot lead, and now they have very uninspiring leadership, no vision, and they'll be there for a while, hopefully.
In the Parliament and the National Assembly, there is training available for members of Parliament.
This has nothing to do with training. This has nothing to do with training. This has to do with just like sometimes thuggery and racism. Now everything under the sun is racist. Everything under the sun. But they don't have other arguments. What are you going? You've been a colossal failure. A colossal failure in government for five years after you came into office with tremendous goodwill and claiming that you're going to have practiced good governance. Came out of office with no achievement, on the most corrupt government ever in our history. I mean, the fact that we don't charge all of these people now, It's just that we decided to move on, from some of them. It's not that they were not corrupt and tried to settle a lot of the cases, just to move on. But if you had to charge people and charge for like what they charge a few people under us, not a single one of them probably would go without a charge in that parliament there, because they all have skeletons in their closet. But we just decided to move on. So you come out with from a government, just from 5 years in office, where you try to steal an election, disrespected the Constitution, violated the Constitution, no history of achievement, ran up a huge debt, signed the worst oil contract you've had in our history. You had a rundown of the health sector. All of these things happen, corruption everywhere, violation of tender board and everything else, projects like Durban Park, massive corruption scams, drug bond. What are you going to argue? What are you going to say to people? All these taxes, new taxes you introduce. So you then go and say, oh, racism. That's your only tool to campaign, racism. You can't campaign on anything else.
How do we deal with that issue of racism?
You got to tackle it frontally. There was a time we tiptoed around the issue. So they will say, oh, the PP is racist, and we say, let's work, let's keep working. People will see what you're doing and see it's for the good of the country. That's why if you examine our record in office, you will see that on a per capita basis, the expenditure in Region 10 is the same or even higher than some PPP-controlled regions. So, because they had more problems in Region 10 when the bauxite industry went down. Nobody talks about, under the PPP, there are several $billions a year we spend to subsidize electricity in Region 10 from the Treasury. Billions of dollars every year to cheap electricity for the whole region, everybody who lived there. Linden and then Kwakwani and the other areas. But if you give $5 to the sugar workers, then suddenly, right, or $1 billion, suddenly it's racist. But you don't look at the billions of dollars every year for 20-something years that we spent there. So they were upset that we give the sugar workers on their severance $250,000 more. Big hullabaloo. When the bauxite workers were laid off in Linden, I was president at that time. And before I was Minister of Finance, then president, we gave many of those workers twice as much as they were eligible for based on the severance agreement. The termination agreement. Nobody complained about that. That's our history. We developed Block 22, Amelia's Ward. People would only focus on in a place where like Fowles, where Indo-Guyanese live. But they would never focus on that. New hospital in Region 10. Many parts of the country. People made progress, and that's why I'm saying we're going to talk more about this. And we're going to talk more about on a fact-based basis that will show that in the 23 years of the PPP government, that Afro-Guyanese made the most progress in terms of owning business, owning land, having jobs, owning vehicles than the 28 years that, 28 plus 5, 33 years that Abnu was in office. That you would see in that period, Guyana lost welfare, and Afro-Guyanese who were mainly in the public sector in the period up to 1992 became pauperized. When we got into office in 1992, you know what was the minimum wage? $25 US, 3,100 Guyana dollars, and the exchange rate was about $130 at that time. That is what we found in the public sector. And Afro-Guyanese worked mainly in the public sector at that time. And even when we left office, they talk about ethnic cleansing. We've been in office for 20-something years. When we left in 2015, 70% of the public sector was still Afro-Guyanese. What happened when they came into office? They sent home 7,000 sugar workers, mainly Indo-Guyanese, another 3,000 from the public sector, 10,000. All the hiring, particularly in the public sector, very few Indo-Guyanese. They rehired. Sent home 1,792, 972 Amerindians. So, you know, that's your record. How do you run away from your record? No, they didn't help anybody. They didn't help Afro-Guyanese. So we're gonna be more. We're gonna talking more about this. In the past, we just stayed and say, "Oh, let's let it run. If you work hard, people will see your heart, and they will support you." But sometimes you need to remind people of these things openly in a debate form and let them come and answer. So when I saw today a group of these people cussing Bolsonaro, right, about racism in Brazil, yeah, it's true. I went to Brazil the first time when I went as the president, and in the Itamaraty, they didn't have, even the guards were not black, even guards. And then I saw Lula make an effort to change this, significant effort to change this. But here in Guyana, where were those same people? And when 1,972 Amerindians were sent home, and they lost over 700 million from the village economy. All they were getting was like a stipend of 30,000 a month. The same, I saw some indigenous organizations or people complaining about Bolsonaro. They didn't say a word here, nor about the sugar workers. We can't be this duplicitous. And then that is the same thing with that. I think I forgot the name, Policy Forum. They're complaining about the NRF and didn't say a word when in an illegal government they passed an NRF where the minister was responsible for managing the fund. Now we put a board in place to manage the fund, and they have a problem. Well, who will appoint the board? The president shouldn't appoint the board, so we must hand it over to Mike McCormack. But they were there, they were party there, they were complicit in a lot of these things. So this is my point, that people have to stand up now and speak out, or else we let some of the fossils and some of these naysayers destroy our future for all young people and all of our people, on both sides. Whether you support PPP or APNU, or you're Indo-Guyanese or Amerindian or Afro-Guyanese, or any other race in this country. If we don't stand up together against these naysayers, they come and want to stop the oil and gas operation here in Guyana. That's going to generate some benefits for our people because we are causing climate change. And when our emission is just a tiny bit, tiny, not 3 minutes in a whole year of global emission, we are causing climate change. And the other countries are busy pumping out emissions every day, have 2-3 cars in their garage and driving it around. And they want to stop it here. We need to stand up. And so you ask me how we're dealing with this racism. I think it's not going to be, we passed constitutional changes. When I was president, we have an Ethnic Relations Commission. The commission can prohibit a political party from contesting an election if they use people's race to mobilize. Very powerful. Very few countries in the world would give an independent commission powers of sanction over the executive of a party. We did it in Guyana because we wanted to remove this scourge of racism from among our midst. But we don't talk enough about it. And by not talking enough, we let these people who thrive on the absence of good people standing up and speaking about it, or people, they thrive in that environment because what they say become gospel. So we gotta, one way of tackling it is ordinary Guyanese fighting it. It's not the guys who cuss each other like one on the market and other that harm our country. It's these who create the impression that they speak on behalf of constituencies, many of them unaccountable, who see this as a tool for their own survival. Those are the ones who are dangerous for our country, and we have to keep fighting it. So if I had anything to do about it, I'd say to all Guyanese, regardless which party you belong to, let's call out these naysayers, or else if they take hold, none of us have a future.
Vice President, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out to chat with us,
Right.
giving us an insight into what to expect for the budget coming next week. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and best wishes to you and your government as you present.
Right, thank you very much.